understanding what are the internal motivators and drives that drive our kids to do certain things. Because for me, I just had my agenda and I wanted everybody else to live up to my agenda, my expectation on getting out the door. And then when I started to see little things happening, this was before I understood the blueprint. I was just trying to get everybody to my agenda. and if my kids were nails, I was the hammer, trying to get everybody out the door on time. And I was probably causing that stress and anxiety instead of what I know now, reading the kids, understand what their motivation and drive is, and setting them up for success, because the approach for each one of them will be different. And I'm sure you experience a lot of those same things with your children. Welcome to Real Talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches, where we discuss all aspects of parenting using the foundation of understanding personality dynamics to raise independent, responsible, and resilient children. My name is Karen Wagnon, founder of Teaching Our Youth and the Parenting Blueprint. Let's dig right in with today's topic and have some real talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches. Well, the dog days of summer are starting to wind down, and there's starting to be signals of fall coming in with our weather. And the next thing you know, school is happening. I am so excited to be here today with Mindy Green, one of our amazing Parenting Blueprint coaches. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about Ready, Set, School. And I don't know about you, but I'm still in the mode of summer, and school is starting in a lot of areas. I know in the South, they started August 1st. I think, Mindy, you were mentioning kids going back in another week. And I'm still hanging on to these long summer days. And then as a mom, I know when summer was coming to an end, and really it's not ending, it's just school is coming in, I started to feel that anxiety of, no, I just want to hang on to more summer, more freedom, more flexibility. But we also knew that we needed to start winding down and getting back into our fall and school schedule. So today we're going to talk about how do we start easing our families back into this fall schedule for school with a little less stress and frustration than maybe we had experienced the year before. So, Mindy, I'm so happy to have you on here. And as a mom of four and a homeschooling mom of four, how was it for you when you started to feel that transition, physically, emotionally? What was happening in your family when this was going on?
Well, first of all, I want to say that for any of you like Karen, who is feeling like, the summer is ending and you just feel like that, some regret, just some sadness around that. I think that's normal. And I can say, even as a homeschool mom, August always felt bittersweet to me because we were transitioning from, our summer fun and just the freedom that comes along with that. We would take lots of trips and we would be with family more and just really making the most of those summer days and the longer days, more sunlight. And, so I was sad, quite honestly. And it wasn't that I wasn't looking forward to what was coming, because that was almost like Christmas when we would get our box. And for anyone who doesn't homeschool, there are so many different curriculum options. So, at school, it's like they have everything set and they know what they're going to be using each year. And I did too. But we would get a huge box around this time of year. And when it would come, Karen, it was Christmas all over again because we'd have all kinds of books, and there's nothing to me. And I know this makes me sound like a nerd, I guess, but there's nothing quite like opening a new book and, and it's like the crispness of the pages and notebooks and the freshly sharpened pencils. So that, I think tempered a little bit of the sadness that I felt because I couldn't wait to dive into whatever we were learning for that year.
Yeah, that's always something fun and exciting. And as a homeschooler, knowing that you're able to have that type of control over that environment was probably a little settling because you knew that that's what was happening as compared to when we start needing to get involved with the school schedule. Fall sports were starting, before school even went back. Our kids were getting engaged, whether it was band or football, all those things, we were starting to ease back into that. But what we want to talk about today is how do we do this and set this up a little bit better so that we don't have some of the stress and frustration that we may have experienced last year? And having multiple children, and Mindy, you did too. There were some kids that were compliant in my house, and then there was one. And every family probably has at least one that does not want to comply with the rules and the expectations of kicking into the school year. And so we're going to give you some structure and strategies to how to make this a smoother transition. But one of the first things that I really want you to pull back on before we start jumping into routines is to reflect back on what is it that we're looking for. What is it in my vision? How do I want my days to go? What were some of the conflicts that I experienced before that I don't want to have to experience now? So this is an opportunity to reflect on, all right, we need to get together with the kids. We need to start winding down summer and getting into the summer schedule. But what is it that worked and what didn't work and that I need to be aware of? And as Mindy, we talked about before we went live, that I need to be intentional with these issues, because if not, it's going to cycle around again. There were things that maybe were smooth and were working fine, or maybe was smooth with a couple of kids and one was a little bit rebellious. How can I be better prepared going into this particular school year? Where were the challenges? Was it with the morning routine, getting them up and out the door on time? Was it when they come home from school and getting homework done? Was it getting chores done? Was it the bedtime routine in that schedule? Where were the areas that were prickly? What worked and what didn't work? And how do I want to approach this for this school year with my kids? And so, Mindy, we talked about, and I want you to pick up on this, is actually sorting out where those prickly points are, but communicating and collaborating with the family as a unit. And I talk about that family meeting as to what the child would like to see going into a new school year. So talk a little bit about that, how we can approach it, not from what we want and we tell the kids, but how we do
Yes.
And I've done that. And that didn't work with one for sure. Kyle was the anti anything I suggested he was not going to do. But how can we approach that to make it a smoother transition? Because the kids are part of the solution. And when they feel as though they're part of the solution, we have a better buy-in, I say. So what are some of the ways that we can set that up?
Well, absolutely. And I think that there's so much that you just said that I want to unpack that a little bit, because I think the answer is in what you shared. And, I know that we all have a vision of what we want as parents, what we want the school year to look like, right? We want our kids to get out the door on time. We want them to be prepared for school. We want them to do well at school. We want them to come home and do their homework immediately. And we want them to do their chores and, right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's a wonderful vision, and it's something to really be hopeful for. However, as we know, when we have different personalities with our kids, they approach things differently. So I have one who always moved at a snail's pace. Snail, snail, snail. And so it's like I would have to start extra early with that particular child, knowing that we needed to get out the door. And I have another child who is like, if we were not leaving right at the time that she thought we should, we were late. And so dealing with the anxiety that she had around, we're going to be late. We're going to be late. I'm not going to be able to get this done. And so it's recognizing, first of all, that we have different kids and they have different styles and needs. So when we can look at that and then be aware of it, then we can also plan around what it is that they need to be successful. Because the bottom line is, I think for any of us as parents, we want our kids to be successful. And we also want to feel like we're doing a good job as parents. So when we can stop and do a little bit of reflection about that, then that, first of all, gives us a foundation to work from.
Yes, that's so important. And just like you, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
No, not at all.
When Kyle was in middle school, he was motivated to get to school on time because his job was to hang the flag in the front of the school. But he had to be there a
Right.
certain time to hang the flag. So that was his motivation, because he had a job at school to do. So he's now nagging the other two to get going, because I had a snaily one too, right? And then I had another one who couldn't find his stuff before he walked out the door. So there was those types of stress and pressure. So when we can pinpoint that these are the areas that were prickly, what do we need to do so that we're not experiencing that, but addressing that with the kids? Having Eric have his backpack ready the night before, so we're not doing that, okay? And then allowing Anna more time. She was my pookie one, and just make sure that she had time, because because when we talk about the stress and anxiety, I probably caused some of that.
Oh, yes,
I
and we
probably caused
do
some of that.
unintentionally, right?
Right, because understanding those needs, Kyle's need for being on time and having his responsibility and the anxiety he felt if we were running late, because if he wasn't there to hang the flag, somebody else was going to hang the flag, and he wasn't. That was not okay with him. That was his job, right? So, understanding what are the internal motivators and drives that drive our kids to do certain things, because for me, I just had my agenda and I wanted everybody else to live up to my agenda, my expectation on getting out the door. And then when I started to see little things happening, this was before I understood the blueprint. I was just trying to get everybody to my agenda. and if my kids were nails, I was the hammer, trying to get everybody out the door on time. And I was probably causing that stress and anxiety instead of what I know now, reading the kids, understand what their motivation and drive is, and setting them up for success, because the approach for each one of them will be different. And I'm sure you experience a lot of those same things with your children. So as we approach this, and things that we want to share with our families today is, I guess the first thing is, what are your expectations? And really what worked well last year, what didn't work well. And then we talk about having that family meeting. So Mindy, how would you approach that with your family when you recognize there were things that worked, things that didn't work? How did you do it with your family?
Well, one of the things is, and if you can hear my dog, forgive me because he's really excited about this topic because a lot of
Busy.
activity going on outside for kids who are trying to get in their last days of summer. So one of the things that we did is I made sure that even when the kids were very young, that we would have little family meetings. And, even a little child who's 3, and they may be going to preschool, or we may be doing, activities at the library. It's like they wanted to know what we were doing and what to expect. And so it could be very simple, like those little simple things. And that's when we would use physical calendars, like the paper calendars. And I would always have one on the refrigerator. And so and that was one of the things that we would learn when they were young, is like, this is the day of the week, and this is the month, and this is what we're doing that day. And so I think that even as our kids get older, sometimes we miss out on that opportunity to have them involved in what's going on. So even if you don't have a big family calendar on your refrigerator, I know that there are things that you can do now on your phone where you're sharing calendars. That way they have an idea of what's going on and what to expect themselves. Right. And then they can manage their own expectations for the day. They can manage any like anxiety that they might have. Maybe like right after school, they have a dentist appointment and they might be really nervous about that. But if they know beforehand, there are some things that they can do, and we can work through that with them. And so I think that this is where these things come into play, like consistency, intentionality, and really listening to them. And so that's what we do during those family meetings. It's like we can bring up issues and also ask them, what do you want to talk about? And don't be alarmed if they cross their arms and say, I don't have anything I want to talk about. I don't want to do this. If there's something there. And, the thing of it is that if they don't have anything to share at the time, that's okay, because as they get more accustomed to those family meetings and knowing that you're truly listening and being open to what they're saying and not judging them for it, then I think that there will be more buy-in. At least that's what I saw in my own family and in the families that I work with. Yeah. Because a lot of times they're concerned about saying something because they're concerned about how you as the parent may react.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's all about the communication and collaboration, So when the school year is starting and we have a particular start time of when that final bell is, how much time do you think you're going to need? What time do you think we really need to be in the car and out the driveway, not just getting everybody into the car. Like we kind of would backtrack those things just so we had some timelines that we would discuss. Some of the kids got up pretty quickly and they were morning kids, and other kids were not. And so then we had to decide, well, then maybe you shower the night before so you're not feeling so rushed to do it. Like we just had to communicate and collaborate so we weren't nagging the kids because that's like the last thing. And I'm not saying, and parents, if you've done that, I've done it too. I'm just telling you, I've done it too. But what we want to talk about today is how can I be intentional about strategies so I am not nagging them to get in the car and start the day that way, where I have just yelled at my kids because, and for us, we were carpooling. So, we're running late, the other family is late, and that just wasn't fair. But being able to have everybody on the same page of what you need, and if that doesn't work out, then do we need to go to bed earlier or what, but problem solve and collaborate on what that will
Mm.
be. And then there were other things that we needed to discuss, which was screen time in the evenings when phones were going to be plugged in. They're getting older. Maybe we have a little, maybe it was 30 more minutes before the phones got plugged in. Like, we had to have all of those discussions in advance so that they knew the expectation. Because when I did not do this, as things came up, I was playing whack-a-mole. All right, well, we got to do this instead. And we got to do this instead. And they were kind of like blindsided. They didn't know what was going on. Why? Because I was not intentional about setting what those expectations were in the beginning. So, parents, listeners, take an opportunities to what is it that you would like to see in the smooth transition through every day? And then what is that going to look like? And how can we communicate that with our kids as to, we really seem to have some challenges with XYZ, or getting homework done, or when homework was done before dinner or after dinner, and how can we communicate that expectation? And then letting us know, like you're saying, give them a voice at the table. When I just get home from 6 hours of school, I don't want to walk in the door and do my homework. Got it. So would you prefer to have, for Kyle, he was a gamer. Eric was usually at sports, so everything came in afterwards. So would you prefer just coming in and having an hour of game time before dinner and then do your homework afterwards? Would that work better for you? And for him, it did. But then that was the expectation. That was the expectation. But then
Right.
also
And
the time management of that came into something else as well.
yes, and that's what I was going to say too, is that I think that whatever expectations that we have, and for our kids too, to recognize that there has to be flexibility built into it. Because if, these are not meant to be rigid.
Right.
And so that's where, so we can create routines in the morning about what's going to be best for them to get up, and what's going to energize and motivate them to get out the door. So like you said with Kyle, he really wanted to be there because he wanted to be the one to hoist the flag in the morning. And, whatever it is for each of our kids that helps them to get out the door. So, I have a child who really loves music. And she also needed time to be able to gently wake up in the morning. And so one of the things I would do is that I would make sure that, that her alarm, so to speak, was music. So then she could lay in bed and that could wake her up, and then she was feeling good. And that was one of the things that was really good for her. I had another child who really needs to eat in the morning. And if he doesn't eat, then he is a bear. And we all know that the way that we start off the morning really dictates the day that we're going to have.
Okay.
And so these are all things that can help them, whatever it is, whatever it looks like in your family that will help them, to start off on the right foot, is important. And to recognize that sometimes those things are going to shift and change. And, we don't have to be rigid with our routines, but they do help, like you said, for them to know what to know, excuse me, what to expect. I'm sorry. I don't know why that's not coming out well, but that's where these conversations come in.
Yep.
And then if they start to act a little bit differently too, and they're a little bit more grumpy, they're a little bit more, I don't know, fill in the blank, for whatever you might see as the year goes on with your kids, that's where we come in. And these family meetings are so important, or even just a personal conversation with them. Hey, I noticed you've been a little bit more edgy or touchy. What's going on? And, and also really listen, but then also give your observations. Maybe they're saying, I really am not liking my first period class. And I feel like I'm not quite prepared. And then that's where you could come in and say, oh, okay, so what subject is this? And, and then have that conversation. What can we do to help you feel more comfortable going into first period? And maybe it is the night before. Maybe they're not getting enough sleep. And so it's taking them a little more time to get ready in the morning because they're, and because they went to bed too late.
Yeah.
So there's lots of flexibility here. And again, it's all surrounding that communication.
It is. I really wanted my kids to know that I had their back because each one of them was different. Each one of them was different. And whatever they needed, I wanted to be able to provide that environment for them to be successful, especially when we're starting the morning, because that's the way we start the day. And so nobody wants to be yelled at. And I was a yeller,
Mhm.
before I started doing this, just to get everybody out, because see, that was my agenda. I was expecting my kids to meet my expectations when my job is to support them in their needs so that my expectations get met. Does that make sense? So if I meet their
Yeah.
needs, my needs will get met. And I wasn't always parenting from that. I was expecting my kids to meet my needs, right? Which was the Nike Swish woman, just do it, right? And that just didn't work for all of them. And so to be able to have that communication and collaboration. And so I'm just kind of curious for those who are listening, today, what were the areas that were sticky for you last year? Was it the morning routine and getting everybody out the door? Was it the homework battles in the evening? Was it technology and that time management, and allowing that time to, yes, maybe for them to check in on some of their stuff, but then also have the time and focus to get their homework done, getting to bed at a reasonable time? These are the things that I want you to identify as to what are the things that you want to discuss at those family meetings. And then there are times where we need to kind of come back together and discuss how it's going. And when we did this, parents, if I were to tell my kids we're going to sit down and have a family meeting, the walls are up. So we would do, and I've talked about this and coach around this. So maybe it's Taco Tuesday. You know what I mean? We have the taco bar out, in the kitchen, and everybody's, standing around the island and eating, and it's just a casual conversation. Or Sundays in the afternoon, pull out the vanilla ice cream and the bananas and all the toppings, and everybody's making ice cream. We're all happy when we're having ice cream, right? And so we can orchestrate these conversations around a more casual time rather than everybody sitting at the table. Now, look, there weren't times where something happened, we all need to sit down and talk about it, but there was a different feel there, a little more tension there as to, oh my God, here it comes. They're going to be telling us what to do, as compared to starting a dialogue. But it's being prepared before that happens and being intentional with what you want to say. The other thing that I'd like to share is, don't come at them with so many things. Three things. What are three things that were the problem last year? No more than three things. Because if you go to 4 or 5 things, they're not going to remember any of it. If we focus on the three things that we know were the challenge last year that we want to kind of smooth out, and then as the year goes in and that starts working, then you might be able to add a couple more things to add into that. But what are the primary things that you want to get set straight that were the challenge going into, at the end of the year? It's like, all right, we can't do this anymore. But then
Oh,
being able
Karen,
to
I
follow
love
those
that.
up.
Yes. If I could just interject real quick with that, because I think, like you just said, that's really important to recognize that when we talk about a family meeting, we're not talking about sitting at the table with our notebooks. I have my notebook right here, and a pen and writing everything down. It's more about it's just about having a conversation with your kids, with your family. And then you can follow those up too with like conversations like you had said, going back and forth between sporting events, and activities. That was prime time with my kids, to touch base with them personally about certain things, and not to overwhelm them with my long laundry list, like what is the naughty list for Santa, like it just goes on and on and on or whatever. It's like keep it short and simple and focus on a couple of things, because otherwise they're going to feel like you're ganging up on them, and nobody wants to feel that way. If our kids came to us and said, hey, I want to talk to you, and they have a whole list, like a whole page full of things, how would you feel? So
Attacked,
it's
I become defensive. I'm just telling you, that's probably
yeah,
would be my approach rather than
yes,
making it more of a
absolutely.
casual, I got your back, you're heading into whatever it is, fifth grade, or you're heading into, sophomore year, and just be excited about, the year and how they're growing and what they're learning and the milestones that they're going to hit. And I wanted my kids to know I had their back,
Yes.
that I had their back. But we still needed to have boundaries and expectations, because if not, parents, it stresses us out. And when we're stressed out, then that energy goes on to them. And that's what causes a lot of the stress and anxiety in the kids, because I created that.
Yes.
I created that in my house. Okay. Kyle and I would be like this. And then I was always the go, 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 mom, and not giving my kids the time. Once I understood their personalities, and the personality dynamics are huge. So if you've not done personality assessments, and I know Mindy is going to have a resource for you that will help you with this Ready Set School, just some guidelines that you can follow as you're preparing for this. That was huge for me, because I understood that Anna needed more time. I understood that Eric needed to have a checklist and get things done the night before so he wasn't running around in the morning trying to find things. I knew that Kyle was going to do what Kyle needed to do, what he wanted to do, not he needed to do when he wanted to do it, but that there were also going to be consequences if he didn't. So the other thing when we have these family meetings that we want to take it one step further is we may outline the expectations and decide how we're going to approach this new school year. But before we finish that conversation, if this does not work, for instance, if the phones are to be plugged in on the charger at 9:30 and your phone does not get plugged in at 9:30 and you're pushing 9:45, what is the consequence for that? Like, we needed to have those boundaries in place so that if it was late, we've already discussed what that's going to be. Maybe they lose a 30 minutes, or maybe they lose 15 minutes the next night until they get it on time. Like, we need to set those boundaries, firm boundaries, but understand what those consequences are in advance. If they're not getting up on time with the way we had discussed and what that morning routine will look like, what do you think the consequence should be? Typically for our home, it was then you're going to bed 30 minutes earlier because obviously you need more time in the morning, right? I mean, so these were
Right.
some of the things that we needed to have in place as the safety net to kind of keep those boundaries firm in advance, not waiting until it doesn't happen and then we're throwing consequences at them in the emotion. So we already know in advance, if this doesn't happen, what are the consequences? When I always ask my kids, what do you think the consequence should be? They always had really harsh consequences. And that's because they
Yes.
wanted the other kids to get in trouble, right? They never thought that they would do it. But I mean, so they were like, lose the phone for 3 weeks or something. It was really so harsh. It was like, then we could come back and negotiate what really was appropriate, that the punishment fit the crime, the discipline fit the crime. Okay. So we need to be able to think that, but collaborate with those kids in advance. If we are missing homework assignments, then maybe we're not having game time until we get caught up on our assignments. Like, so we need to take that one step further. That's why I say reflect on your expectations. What is it that you want to have in advance? And if you're co-parenting, you need to get with the other parent and discuss that you're both on the same page, because it's inevitable that you're going to get at the table and the other one will be like, you don't have to do that now. You just showed you were wobbly, and those kids are going to play right into that crack in the wall, right? So we need to
Absolutely.
together know what the expectations are. And we can have in our mind, like, I already knew if the phone wasn't plugged in, what I think the consequence should be. I already knew that if homework assignments were missing, what the consequence should be. But I wanted to dialogue it with them. And if I asked them, what do you think the consequence should be? And they said, I don't know. This is another phrase to hold on to. Can I make a suggestion? And
I
when I
love
say,
that.
can I make a suggestion? That opens the door for them to receive, rather than saying, and if you don't, you're losing 15 minutes the next day. Do you see the difference? And now I get defensiveness when I say that. When I ask, what do you think the consequence should be? We may be able to dialogue that. But if we don't, and they don't know, then I say, can I make a suggestion? Now that, again, it starts a conversation that we can settle on, but we don't just let it go with no boundaries there, with no boundaries and expectations.
Well, and I think that's really important, that that is taking it the next step too, because it's not just, this isn't all pie in the sky, like, dream, like this is my dream, for the year, because I mean, wouldn't that be lovely if it all just went perfectly? But we know that that's not real life.
Not at all, right?
Yes, and our kids are growing and they have their own thoughts, and they're not always going to plug their phone in at 9:30. And so if they know going forward what's going to happen, it's like that gives them the boundary. It's like, I think of this as bumper cars. And sometimes, we have kids who steer straight for the side, and then they bump up against that constantly. And it's important for them to recognize that you're going to stand firm with that, and that you've also talked about that beforehand with them. It's not just you saying this, it's like you've also given them the opportunity, well, what do you think?
Right.
And you will find that a lot of times your kids give harsher consequences than you ever would. And, and if you find yourself going to a harsh consequence, maybe that's a time to step back, you and your partner, to step back and say, well, why did I go there? Because sometimes it triggers things in us as well. Maybe with the way that we had been parented or a consequence that we had been given. And you want the consequence to match whatever the situation is.
Yeah.
So, if it's that they haven't plugged their phone in, by a certain time, you're not going to take away um, being able to go to practice, for instance, for a month or whatever it is. Make sure that it fits whatever the infraction, I'm going to say,
It
was.
does. Because discipline is a discipline of self discipline. And what we're doing with these logical consequences is teaching a discipline, right? And so, for
Mhm.
instance, if we are missing homework assignments, but you've been on your game system because you said you didn't have homework, then we're not going to be on the game system until all these assignments are caught up. And these are just things that we can discuss. And it's being fair. It's just being fair, so they know that if I'm going to blow it off, that we all know we can tap in and see where their assignments are. We have access to all that information now, so they can't get away with it. And so, but these are things that we can communicate and collaborate. I am all about the communication and collaboration rather than the directing and correcting. If all we do is tell our kids what to do, but we don't give them a voice at the table, that's when that resentment and sneakiness will come in. Either you're going to get blatant defiance or you're going to get passive. Okay, where they're going to go behind you and be sneaky about things. And that's not what we want. We want that relationship of trust and mutual respect. And we get that when we can all come to the table and talk about it. So, parents, comment below what have been your sticky things in last year that you really want to get on top of. And Mindy, you have created a resource for parents that are heading into the season right now to give them some guidance. And what you did is you actually used the foundation of the parenting blueprint and the understanding of personalities for each area that could be sticky and putting together routines. So tell us a little bit more about this resource because we want to be able to get it to our listeners.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was just thinking, I was reflecting myself on what are some of the areas that can trip us up when we're thinking about getting ready for school. So it is really those morning routines that can get us. It can be, after school, what does that look like? The nighttime routines, also nutrition. I have a lot of wonderful resources there for nutrition. And I teamed up and collaborated with a wonderful woman who does very, very simple and easy meals for dinner. Because I don't know about you as a homeschool mom, and I'm sure parents during the summer and on the weekends, you've heard this, and you've just finished breakfast and then your kids are like, well, what's for dinner? And I used to, my eyes, I think, would have popped out of my head. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. And so Linda has given her expertise in this and added that into this wonderful resource. So you have that. It's like, I think hers is called Back to School, Back to Sanity. And so she gives those things that are very, very easy, like shortcuts that we can take to making really healthy, easy meals that the kids will love and being connected with them in that process. So it flows really well with everything else in the guide. So it's called Ready, Set, School, A+ routines for back to school success.
Wow. Yes, meal planning. Moms, have we been there? Right? It's like, I got to feed them every single day, and then we run out of ideas. And I'll tell you, I did a lot of crock pot meals, but then again, I still needed recipes and what are they going to like? And just having that, when I was on top of that, my whole afternoon stress was completely reduced. If I had either I put it in the crock pot the night before and then I just had to hit play in the morning or whatever it was, having something simple, 30-minute meals that I could do when we get home, including the kids in the meal prep, which gave us some time together. That resource between what you're providing with those routines and the meal plan, this is going to be an incredible resource. It's going to cover all the bases of what you're going to be walking into as we're getting ready to set into this new fall and school season. So Mindy, what else do you want to share before we sign off that will really give some parents some inspiration as we're heading into the downside of summer and we're gearing into a new school year?
I think the biggest thing that I want to share with parents right now, with our audience, is just please be kind to yourselves. If you find yourself not being as prepared as you would like to be, that maybe you have been nagging, that you have yelled, that you've done those things, please know that that does not irreparably damage your relationship with your kids. There are ways that you can repair and you can heal. And the biggest thing that I used to do, and I did this a lot with my kids, because I didn't always approach it well, is I would apologize. And it was heartfelt, it was sincere. And so if you find yourself in that situation, because I know some of you have already gone back to school's getting ready to start, just be kind to yourself. And when you're doing that, then you're also kind to your kids. And and knowing that you're in this together and you don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah. That's so true. I've had to apologize. And then what it does is it's humbling. You know what I mean? It's humbling to me. They also see that model that if I'd done something that was upset or I overreacted, that I caught it and I apologize. And then I always say, what can we do better so that I don't get to that place again? You know what I mean? And then again, working through it together. And again, it's just like repairing even in a marriage relationship, when you have some disagreements on things, how can we do better? How can I better understand how I can approach this if this were to happen again? And when we got to that point, and we've done that where I apologize because I was a yeller, I learned how my kids perceived my parenting style. And it gave me another lens on which I could then see what I needed to change. Look, kids are kids. They're going to do all these things. They are a blank slate. Our goal in raising them is to be the best parent we can be, to help them be the best they can be according to their design. And if I did not understand that Kyle needed a level of control and perfectionism because he was really hard, he was black and white, his way was the right way, he was resistant to almost everything. Where Eric was very fun and relational, but kind of forgetful and not organized. And Anna was my people pleaser perfectionist. And this was all out of the same flipping gene pool, right? And so it was not a one size fits all approach. And the way you have put together this resource for families is you are giving, based on the personality style, what is the best approach? I mean, you have given an incredible cheat sheet for families. So click that link and grab a hold of this resource because it's going to give you some insights. Because for me, because if it wasn't my personality style, I don't even know what that looks like because I'm not wired that way. So I really did need a cheat sheet and an understanding of if my child needs that, well, how do I do that? Because that just wasn't part of my DNA. So I kept going back to the same old habits that weren't changing anything. Like I knew with Anna that I needed to give her more time. I knew that I could not be direct in my communication because she would get scared or think I was yelling at her and it would shut her down. And I did that. I have no time for shutdown. But me saying that was only going to make her more stressful. So I had to adapt to meet her needs so that my needs got met. So what are the areas? What are your family values and the expectations of what you want to see going into the school year? Be intentional about setting up meetings with your family. Do the Sunday or the Taco Tuesday or whatever it is, where it's just a casual conversation that we can weave these things in. Not sitting down. I had a client and I talked about the family meeting, and her son said, "I want my lawyer present." You know what I mean? So we cannot say we're going to have a family meeting because all of a sudden it's like, "Oh no, what's wrong?" And they're expecting discipline rather than just being casual conversation of how can we work better together this year. So Mindy, I'm excited about the resource that you have to provide for your families. Click that link and grab this. You are not going to want to miss this. I looked at it last night. There is so much value in this particular resource for every area of your day that you may have some prickly points with your kids. And Mindy has given some great structure and guidelines on how to smooth out those wrinkles so that you can have a much better school year and maintain that positive relationship with your kids. So, Mindy, I'm so grateful to have this time with you today. I'm so grateful for what you're able to offer our listeners because it's a wonderful resource. If you have not already done so, like this episode, share this episode, and subscribe to Real Talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches. And Mindy, I'm so happy again that you were able to put something so valuable together for our listeners. So, are y'all ready? It's time to get started for another school year. Mindy, last words.
Just know that you can do this It may look different than you think,
Yeah.
but you've got it, and your kids are going to benefit because of the intentionality that you're bringing to it.
Intentionality. I love that word. Awesome. All right. We'll see you next time with Real Talk of the Parenting Blueprint Coaches. I'll talk to you then. Take care. Bye.